want to get started, go for it.
All right. Well, I want to welcome everyone. We're tonight. Our topic is racism and white lives, and let me remind you that we know some folks are joining us on tablets, and the sometimes it's difficult to get attention when you have a tablet. So just wave, and Lori's watching. If you have a question or comment, and we'll do our best to make sure that everyone gets a chance to say what they would like to say. This is a conversation, so we want you to be a part of it, but don't be bashful at all. And so I think we will begin because we've got quite a lot of information that we would like to have you discuss and that we're going to bring to your attention. But I'd like to open by saying that I'm going to be talking I this time. And one of the things I learned a long time ago is that I is very important. Instead of trying to say the collective we, it's I. It's my experience. And I was born into a culture which I belonged, and I had nothing to say about it racially. I was born as a white baby in a hospital with a white doctor. Now, how do I know that? I was born in Prineville, Oregon, over in Eastern Oregon, in Central Oregon. It was 1940, and my doctor was there for a while longer after I was born, and then he went into the military. Now, what does that say? And I don't know if my mother ever said that Dr. Wall was his name, and I don't know if she ever said that he was white, but I know he was because he went into the military, and the military was segregated at that time, and doctors hired certainly in Prineville were not of color; they were white, and there were white nurses that attended my mother, and she was in the hospital for 10 days. And that was the culture that I was born into, and I didn't have anything to say about it. Forces of racism then were shaping me from the time that I took my first breath. And then as time went on and I went into to school, my teachers were all white. My classmates in Klamath Falls were all white, as I remember, in the first few grades. And then as I got older and we drove around town, I'd see billboards with advertising on them, and those billboards with the models were white. The people in the billboards were white. I listened to the radio when I was a boy. We didn't have television, and the actors and actresses, we didn't know what color they were. Because all we could do was listen to them, but there were stories about white people, and so that was, and then sometimes in magazines about radio. In those days, they had radio magazines, and there'd be pictures of the actors and the actresses, and they were all white. Um, Looked at when TV came along, again, everybody was white. And occasionally there might be a servant or somebody maybe working in the stable who was of color, but mostly they were all white. The presidents of the United States when I was growing up were all white. They're heroes, Superman, eventually Superwoman. All of the heroes that I grew up with were white. Camp counselors, going to counseling or to camps, were white. Scout leaders were white. Neighbors were white. Friends were white. Dolls in the store were white. The doctor, I mentioned the doctor that delivered me was white, and all doctors at that time seemed like that we came in contact with were white. The dentist, clerks in most stores, the magazines. I mentioned the radio. but most magazines that you looked at had people who were white. Books, again, stories, unless there would be a story like, well, there was a movie, remember, Gone with the Wind, and there were some African Americans in that movie, but they were in subservient roles. You'd see, and in September when the new cars came out, the new cars would have models in them. What color were the models? They were white. The clothes that we bought, again, both the mannequins in the store and the models that were that were modeling the clothes, they were white. Churches, ordained clergy at that point, including my own church, were white. And an interesting thing, when I was in seminary, Mike, who was an African American, and he was a friend of mine, and early on when we met, he said, you're new to the Bay Area, and he was from the South, and he said, he was there a year before me, and he said, I'd be happy to take you each Sunday to a different church. And so we went to a whole bunch of different churches in the San Francisco Bay Area, and it was a great experience, the one I remember today. But one that I'm working on an autobiography, and I wanted the details. Well, I found the details the other day. We went into a church in Oakland, an Episcopal church, and it wasn't Episcopal. It was just a church in Oakland. And afterwards, the minister knew I was a seminarian in the Episcopal church, and he offered to meet with us. And he spent an hour with us. And then he invited the chair of their governing board to come in and say hello. And we talked to him for a while. Well, he was a Black Panther when the Black Panthers were so prominent. And then eventually they told me that we were sitting in the kind of the war room of the Black Panthers. And that's where they had gathered during the years that they were active. That made an impression on me. Getting back to go to the bank along the way, and how many bankers did we meet that were African Americans? I didn't meet any. And then there somebody in your family died, and you went to the funeral home. Funeral directors always white, and then you got your hair cut, or if a woman you wanted to have your hair done. The people that took care of your hair, they were all white. Now, in terms of heroes, there was an exception that eventually we found sports heroes that were like Joe Louis was one of the big ones, and then baseball. There was an African American baseball player who finally made it, and so he was. He was somebody that we could all root for. But then I want to contrast that with a few months ago, one of the channels in Portland, one of the TV channels, they had a documentary about Black athletes in the Portland area, or in the state of Oregon. And one of the young people that I remember was an athlete from Prineville, and he was a football player. Well, Prineville, of course, where I was born, and so he said he would play football on Friday nights, and he was the big hero because he said I was a good player, and then during the week he was just this Black kid who's going to school in high school, and so he was nothing exceptional, but on Friday nights he was the hero. And along the way, as I've been thinking about it, I never gave any thought to what others might think about my race. It was just something that I ignored, that I didn't ignore it. I just didn't think about it. No one would stop me if I went into a gated community, or if I went into a restaurant. Nobody would stop me. And so that's just the way it was. And then we had a foreign exchange student who came to he spent a year with us, Hiro Uematsu, who today is a doctor and has a law degree in Japan. He's married to an American, And, you know, he's a guy we're very proud of. And so when he was here for the year, he was here on December 7th. And so before he went to school that day, we had the talk with him. You know, we talked about the talk that African Americans have with their parents about, you know, driving and being careful what they do with their hands if they're pulled over by the police. Well, we had a talk with Hiro because we didn't know what was going to happen on December 7th, if anybody would say anything because he was Japanese. And, you know, that was just something we thought we should do for him. And then I mentioned something that early on during the coronavirus, I was reading the newspaper, the Salem newspaper, and I was looking at an obituary and just happened to notice they said that funeral services would be delayed until the China virus was over. And so I called the funeral director and talked to him, and I identified myself. I said, I'm an Episcopal priest, and I just read the obituary. And he said, yes. And I said, I'm really offended that you would say, call it the China virus. And he said, well, that's what the family put in. And I said, well, you know, I think one of your jobs as a funeral director is to counsel the family. And that's just pure racism. And so, yeah, I haven't seen it since. And they'll say it's until the passage of the coronavirus or until the emergency situation is over, whatever. They come up with a different name. So those are some points that I wanted to mention as we open. And now, Greg, would you like to take it from there?
Sure, I would just kind of ask everyone as we continue on in the conversation, and it's great to see you all, by the way, is today, as you made your way through the day and navigated your schedule, did you ever think or worry about your color of your skin? Did it ever come across your mind that something that would make you have to do or act differently, say things differently because of the color of your skin? I know for me, I've never been told to go to another restroom, to say I can't sit at a counter in a restaurant. Nobody told me to go to the back door. When I was hired and I did a career service with the Oregon State Police, I never at one time thought that I was hired because they were trying to fill a quota. And when I continually hear the Black Lives Matter, and then people respond saying, well, all lives matter, or if it has to do with if someone says Black Lives Matter in relationship to the police actions, and they say, well, all blue lives matter in response to that, I just think about the work we have to do as white people, because those responses show ignorance about what Black Lives Matter is about and why Black people say it. Of course, Black people know and believe all lives matter. They also would say that they're not saying blue lives don't matter either. The fact is, though, that Black lives have not mattered. When we wrote liberty and justice for all, it didn't mean all. It didn't mean Black people, okay? All men are created equal. When we wrote that, it didn't mean certain people. So that's what they mean. And they feel it today because of just the dynamics of our society and our world. So yeah, I grew up very privileged, and we have a lot of historical events that kind of show us where we are and that have helped turn this tide on racism and kind of racial belief. And one that I just wanted to point out was Brown versus the Board of Education, a landmark decision in 1954, Supreme Court decision that really put a stake in the ground as far as the history of race relations in the United States. And the court basically stripped away the constitutional functions that segregated schools or education by race. And it made education an equal opportunity for everyone. And then, of course, we have different court actions and different things in our society that have helped kind of peel away at this problem and to work hard to create equal and equality and justice for all. And Are you ready for this breakout, Fred?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we would go into breakout and
Well,
ask you.
before we do that, I'd like to, I want to read something because this is rather lengthy. But what I'd like to have you do, obviously we can't write this all in one little note, but just kind of listen to it. And then the article itself is, will be the topic for the first breakout. And that breakout will be about 10 minutes. In 1965, novelist, playwright, essayist, poet, and activist, the late James Baldwin, wrote this. He said, "I don't know if white Christians hate Negroes or not, but I know that we have a Christian church which is white and a Christian church that is black. I know that the most segregated hour in American life is high noon on Sunday. I don't know whether the labor unions and their bosses really hate me, but I know I am not in their unions. I don't know if the real estate lobby is against black people, but I know that the real estate lobbyists keep me in the ghetto. I don't know if the Board of Education hates black people, but I know the textbooks they give my children to read and the schools we have to go to. Now, this is evidence. You want me to make an act of faith risking my life on some idealism which you assure me exists in America, which I have never seen." So the question then for the breakout is this true 55 years later? So you've got 10 minutes then in the breakout rooms to have a discussion along these lines.